President Trump delivers a primetime address on affordability, but did it make a dent? Plus, heritage Americans or creedal Americans, it's a debate breaking out on the right. First, in exactly 1 week, on Christmas Day, episodes 1 and 2 of the Pendragon cycle Rise of the Merlin begin streaming for Daily Wire Plus All Access members. Here's the truth. No one else was ever going to make this. No one was going to bring this legend to life with the scale and conviction it deserves. It's huge and it's demanding and it's risky. But we built this company to do big, demanding, risky things. And now we're doing the same thing with entertainment. Christmas Day, All Access members see episodes 1 and 2 before anyone else. It's a hell of a deal. We're talking like a month early because on January 22nd, the 7-part epic launches for all of our members. So if you want to see what the fuss is all about, you need to become an All Access member like right now. The moment Rise of the Merlin hits your screen, you're going to understand exactly why we went this big. Become a Daily Wire Plus member right now during our Christmas sale. Get 40% off new annual memberships at dailywire.com/subscribe. Well, President Trump last night attempted a reset of the first year of his presidency. Not really a reset in the sense that he's not actually sort of redoing his policy, but a narrative reset, an attempt to seize the narrative away from a left which keeps saying the word affordability after the victory of Zoran Mamdani in that New York mayoral election. He's trying to seize back the narrative. And last night, he successfully did that in one sense and unsuccessfully in another sense. Yes, Americans are now talking about affordability. Yes, the president of the United States did address that head on in the speech. No, it wasn't an amazing performance. And all those things can be true at once. So first, you sort of have to set the scene. The president has been experiencing historically low approval ratings. The president obviously is looking forward to the midterm elections, and Republicans are not in amazing shape in the midterm elections. They're down on the generic congressional ballot by a significant amount at this point. If the elections were held today, high likelihood that Republicans would lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 seats. With that said, the president is attempting to convince Americans that things are getting better. And he happens to be right on that. He happens to be correct that the economy is indeed improving in marked and obvious ways. And so last night he announced that he was going to be doing a nationwide address, a national address. Now, that is a kind of throwback. The reality is the president can now speak to the entire nation whenever he pleases. He could go live on the White House page anytime he wants. We no longer exist in the era of 3 networks in which the president declares a national address, all 3 networks go to him, and then everybody in America watches it. So the ratings on these sorts of addresses just are not what they used to be. If the president wishes to get attention, he's a master at it. He doesn't have to do a national address. And so when someone does a national address, people sort of expect that there will be something groundbreaking happening. And there were some outlandish predictions by podcasters who are generally inaccurate in the information they provide their audiences. Those predictions were taken quite seriously by many people in the online space. Predictions that Trump was calling a national address in order to announce that we're invading Venezuela or something. But that's not what happened. The president instead did a national address about the state of the economy. And there were some very good things that he did here. I think it was great that he showed charts. It was sort of a Reagan-esque move. President Reagan used to do this back in the 80s. He would do a national address, and he would take out actual charts and try to educate the American people about what was happening. And President Trump did that last night. So, for example, he showed Joe Biden's price increases and Trump's price decreases in a wide variety of areas, ranging from hotel rates, up 37.4% under Joe Biden, down 5.1% under Donald Trump, to propane rates, 24.9%, up under Biden, down 4.2%, under Trump. Gasoline up nearly 31% under Joe Biden, down 7% under Trump. Sporting events up nearly 50% under Joe Biden, down almost 10% under Trump. Those are all good things to show the American people. Now, there is one problem with that, which is that when you look at a chart like that, you think that the baseline price has gone down from where it was before Joe Biden. But that's not true. If the price rises 40% under Joe Biden and then comes down 10% under Donald Trump, well, it's still way higher than it was before Joe Biden took office. And that's the embedded part of the economy that President Trump is not really going to be able to wipe away. Years of inflation cannot be wiped away absent some sort of economic downturn. But the president is right to point out wage increases, real wage increases under his tenure, wage decreases under Joe Biden. The private sector wage growth averaged $1,048 since he returned to the White House versus losses of almost $3,000 under Joe Biden. The president showed the new yearly mortgage cost increase under Joe Biden up almost $15,000 versus Trump's new yearly mortgage cost decrease down almost $3,000. And when he points out Obamacare, he says it's not the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault, it's the Unaffordable Care Act. And that, of course, is true as well. So one of the questions is why Americans aren't feeling it. And this has been the big question. We've been asking it here on the program for a while. Why do Americans not seem to be feeling it? So I think there are a few reasons. One, obviously, is that Americans' expectations of what's going to happen with the amounts they pay is that it's going to actively go markedly down, not just from where it was last year, but from where it was 3 or 4 years ago. Because if you radically inflate prices and then you decrease them marginally, people are still going to feel pretty pressed. So that's number one. Number two, many of the items the president is citing as having dropped in price are not the items that Americans most commonly buy. The number one complaint you will hear from Americans right now about pricing is in the grocery markets. Supermarkets is where people feel pressed. If you're going and you are shopping for a family of 4 for a week of food, you're now paying in some cases 30, 40% more than you were just 3 or 4 years ago. And if the places that you most often shop are the places where you feel the most inflation and the most unaffordability, that's what's going to stick in your mind. So yes, mortgage rates might be down, but how many people are actually taking out a new mortgage this year in the United States? The answer is not all that many. So I asked our friends, our sponsors over at Comet, a project of perplexity, what are the items Americans shop for most frequently? Because this is a great way of trying to determine how Americans are feeling. If the thing you buy most frequently is up in price, you're going to feel pressed. If the thing you buy once every 20 years is down in price, you're not going to feel that quite as much because your last comp wasn't last year. Your last comp was probably 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago. If your last mortgage was taken out at 2.5% under the George W. Bush administration, and your new mortgage is being taken out at 5.75% under the Trump administration, you're going to feel like things are more expensive, even though the mortgage rates are down from where they were a year or two ago. So, asking Comet, what are the items Americans shop for most frequently? Americans most frequently shop for everyday staples, like groceries, basic household supplies, personal care items, and clothing, both in-store and online. Not coincidentally, those are the areas where you have seen an elevation in prices, with groceries and particularly with clothing. When you take a look at mortgages, the question is, because the president cited mortgage rates coming down, which is true, what percentage of Americans take out a mortgage every year? There's no official statistic for what percentage of Americans take out a mortgage each year, according to our friends over at Comet, but available data imply that only a small single-digit share of adults do so in a typical year. Using recent mortgage origination counts and population figures, a reasonable ballpark is roughly 2 to 3% of the U.S. population every year. So if you're citing, as an example of costs going down, mortgage rates going down, only a small percentage of Americans are actually going to feel that in the moment, and even the ones who are feeling it are not comparing the mortgage rates they could have gotten last year to this year. They're comparing, many of them, the mortgage rate that they took out 10 years ago to the one they're getting this year, and it's higher this year than it was 10 years ago. That's why Americans are feeling pressed. With that said, it is good for the president to get specific. I've been urging the president to get specific. I think it's very good that he did. Truly. And again, the delivery is another question. I don't think it was his best delivery last night, but I've been saying for a while that affordability is a weasel word. Affordability is vague. Affordability is a feeling. You can't go around to people and ask them, are things affordable, and expect them to say yes. Virtually no one who is not quite wealthy and doesn't think about costs thinks of things as affordable. For most of my life, everything felt unaffordable. And then at a certain point, we achieved a certain level of income where everything felt affordable. But you kind of have to move way up in the income ladder in order for things to feel affordable, generally speaking, where you're not really thinking about it. Because when you think about whether things are affordable or not, what you mean is, am I thinking about the price of the thing that I am buying? There are certain areas of your life where you're not thinking about the price of the thing that you're buying. Affordability is a feeling. It is not a statistical fact. So the president trying to drill down and get into the stats, which is sort of counterintuitive. He doesn't like to do this too much. I think it's actually quite good. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, this episode is sponsored by our friends over at Birch Gold. Our first advertiser at the Daily Wire was Birch Gold Group. In that time, we've helped thousands of Daily Wire listeners diversify into physical gold. Talk about peace of mind, especially when you see gold up over 50% this year. In all that time, the most successful promotion we've ever run with Birch Gold was the 24-karat gold-plated truth bomb. That's our version of a bunker buster on left-wing ideology. Well, we happen to have an extremely limited number in cold storage. Right now, until they're gone, with a qualifying purchase from Birch Gold, you can own a Daily Wire Golden Truth Bomb. Let Birch Gold help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. And if your purchase qualifies, they'll send you a Golden Truth Bomb. I bought more gold from Birch Gold this year. It was very, very easy. I called them up, went through all my questions, and now the gold sits safely in my safe. With rate cuts from the Fed in 2026, the dollar will likely be worth less. And what happens if that AI bubble bursts? Well, you should diversify. It's a smart thing to do. Just text my name, Ben, to 989898. Claim your eligibility before December 22nd. Don't wait. Text Ben to the number 989898 today, because Birch Gold will run out of those Golden Truth Bombs. Text Ben to 989898. Also, this episode is sponsored by Pure Talk. As a consumer, you carry the success or failure of businesses in the palm of your hand. Their success depends on your decision to spend money with them or their competitor. Well, my friends at Pure Talk would like to say thank you from the bottom of their hearts for choosing Pure Talk for your wireless needs. Because of you, they've had a record-breaking year. Because of your generosity through their Roundup for Charity program, they've been able to donate over $500,000 to America's Warrior Partnership, who stand on the front lines of preventing veteran suicide. Your patronage has allowed Pure Talk to donate 1,000 hand-sewed Made in America flags to your fellow veterans. And when you choose Pure Talk as your wireless provider, you choose to support American jobs. Like I said, as a consumer, you've got the power to make or break companies. And with the money the big wireless guys throw around on advertising, you're inundated with offers everywhere you look. So, from everyone in the Pure Talk family, thank you for your trust, and God bless America. Best coverage, best price, a company that actually likes your values. Go check them out right now. That's puretalk.com. Again, puretalk.com to get started. So the president last night led off by saying that he inherited a mess and he's fixing it. This is true.
11 months ago, I inherited a mess, and I'm fixing it. When I took office, inflation was the worst in 48 years, and some would say in the history of our country, which caused prices to be higher than ever before, making life unaffordable for millions and millions of Americans. This happened during a Democrat administration, and it's when we first began hearing the word affordability. Our border was open, and because of this, our country was being invaded by an army of 25 million people.
Okay, President Trump then went on to go after the left. Here he was.
For the last 4 years, the United States was ruled by politicians who fought only for insiders, illegal aliens, career criminals, corporate lobbyists, prisoners, terrorists, and above all, foreign nations, which took advantage of us at levels never seen before. They flooded your cities and towns with illegal aliens. They decimated your hard-earned savings. They indoctrinated your children with hate for America. They just released a level of violent felons that we had never seen to prey on innocent. They caused war. They caused mayhem. They caused a horrible situation all over the globe. But now you have a president who fights for the law-abiding, hardworking people of our country, the ones who make this nation run.
Now, again, the president is right about all of this. I know there was a lot of criticism of the president last night. This was pointless. Why are we doing this? What are we watching? Okay, that's true. But the question is, are you talking about the thing that he said? So maybe you're talking about the way in which he said it. Fine. But are you talking about the things that he actually said? If so, then it actually is a political victory. And this is something that I've had to learn as a political observer over the course of Trump's 2 terms now. Because I also tend to look at the framework of how did he say it? Was it beautifully performed? And one of the things you realize in watching President Trump is that President Trump is fine with giving a mediocre performance as long as the spotlight is on him. And so bringing the spotlight back to him to talk about things he wants to talk about, even if you don't like the performance, is a way of redirecting the attention to a topic that he wants to talk about, which is what he did successfully last night. So President Trump started talking about his tax cuts, which, of course, are an economic victory.
Next year, you will also see the results of the largest tax cuts in American history that were really accomplished through our great, big, beautiful bill, perhaps the most sweeping legislation ever passed in Congress. We wrapped 12 different bills up into one beautiful bill. That includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. Under these cuts, many families will be saving between $11,000 and $20,000 a year, and next spring is projected to be the largest tax refund season of all time.
Okay. He also went on to discuss bringing the economy back by bringing prices down, which is the thing most people are concerned about right now.
Here at home, we're bringing our economy back from the brink of ruin. The last administration and their allies in Congress looted our treasury for trillions of dollars, driving up prices and everything at levels never seen before. I am bringing those high prices down and bringing them down very fast.
Okay, so again, this was an attempt to shift the conversation, and I think that it will be the beginning of a sustained campaign to do precisely that. Now, of course, all of that relies on the economy continuing to hold up, the economy continuing to be good. It relies on economic growth. It relies on wage increases. It relies on a continued flattening of the cost curve when it comes to inflation. Right now, a lot of Republicans in purple districts quite worried because they're looking at the polls and they can see themselves losing their seats. And this resulted yesterday in 4 vulnerable House Republicans rebelling against Speaker Mike Johnson and backing a Democratic effort to force a vote on extending ACA subsidies, that'd be Obamacare, exposing GOP fractures over surging healthcare costs headed into next year's midterm elections. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. And of course, when we talk about surging costs, what we mean is that Joe Biden put into place subsidies that expired. Those subsidies, in expiring, jack up costs. But the subsidies never should have been in place in the first place. The subsidies were actually part of the jacking up of the cost. Because when you subsidize a thing, what you get typically is a higher price. This is true anywhere and everywhere that the government pours money on a fire. Representative Mike Lawler of New York joined 3 Republicans from Pennsylvania's swing district in signing a petition led by House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries that would force a vote on a 3-year extension of enhanced Obamacare subsidies. The lawmakers acted after GOP leaders blocked votes on compromise measures aimed at extending and trimming the subsidies, saying the needs of their voters were urgent. And again, the reason for that presumably is these purple district Republicans need to go back home and say, listen, I worked in bipartisan fashion to try to avoid that spike in your Obamacare premiums. And if we didn't get it done, that's not my fault. So you can see why they did it. Now, it's not going to matter because it'll go to the Senate and it will presumably die in the Senate. There are not 60 votes to push forward the Obamacare subsidies, but it will be added impetus for some sort of compromise deal, which is the most likely outcome of what happens here, is some sort of compromise deal with an extension of the Obamacare subsidies for not 3 years, but maybe a year or 2 years, while other measures pushed by Republicans start to eat away at the costs. That, I think, is where this ends up. There's been an attempt to say that this is a blow to Mike Johnson's leadership, but again, I'm not sure exactly what you expect from the Speaker. Speaker Johnson, I think, has done an extraordinary job in navigating an incredibly fractious and tough caucus. He has a majority essentially of 1 vote. And so it's not a shock that a few people are going to defect and move over to the Democrats in order to preserve their own districts. Johnson had said he would not hold any vote on subsidies this week, citing widespread objections from Republicans who call Obamacare a failed program that has done nothing to rein in healthcare costs. In a TV appearance early on Wednesday, Speaker Johnson warned colleagues against trying to bypass leadership, and he said the party would tackle broader healthcare policy changes in the new year. But if you're one of these 4 Republicans, again, the goal presumably is to be able to go back to your district and say, listen, I did my best. Now, Democrats, you have to admire the gall. Their basic move here was do nothing. Obstruct. Don't come to a compromise. Don't come to an agreement. Don't try to fix things. According to Axios, that was the strategy. Don't give an inch to Republican moderates looking for an escape hatch. And it worked. By following that simple strategy, Jeffries got everything he wanted, a House vote on a 3-year extension of the subsidies without income caps or cost offsets. Now, Jeffries was pressed by several of his centrist members to throw his support behind 1- or 2-year extensions, as we were talking about. But instead, he held firm and Republicans came to him. In the end, it's not going to help. In the end, there will be some sort of compromise deal that gets cut, which is, again, not a shock. The Wall Street Journal editorial page is very critical of these 4 Republicans. They say, quote, they did so even though Mr. Johnson suggested they could have a vote on an amendment to his bill if they could find spending cuts to offset the cost of the extension. This would have required proposing other reforms, and the Republican renegades said no. Their sole aim is to protect themselves from Democratic attacks, but signing the petition is unlikely to provide much insulation. It will instead give Democrats more confidence they have Republicans on the run, and Chuck Schumer more leverage to scare GOP senators to revolt as well. Now, one of the problems here is that in Congress, there's always a temptation to push things off until the crisis moment. Republicans should have been figuring this out 6 months ago. Republicans should have been attempting to push some sort of compromise solution 6 months ago so that they could say Democrats are the ones who are allowing the subsidies to expire. That would have been the thing to do. And presumably, the Republicans will spend the next month doing that, coming up with some sort of compromise solution that they propose and that Democrats keep voting down over and over and over. But for the moment, again, all this goes to is the reality for a lot of Republicans in purple states, in purple districts, that if they continue to kind of double down, as opposed to making moves to win their districts, they are likely to lose their seats. President Trump's coattails are not endless, and President Trump's approval ratings are not that high. And so a lot of these people are thinking, how do I preserve my job? And that is absolutely normal in the world of electoral politics. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, if you owe the IRS more than $5,000 in back taxes, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Priority Tax Relief. Look, I get it. Dealing with tax debt, it's stressful. Maybe you fell behind on filing, you had to pull from your 401k, or you just had a rough patch. Whatever has happened, Priority Tax Relief can help. They're a team of experienced tax attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents who've been doing this for over 15 years. These folks negotiate directly with the IRS on your behalf, and they are good at it. They've handled thousands of cases and helped clients reduce their tax debt significantly. Some people who owed 25 or even 50 grand were able to get that reduced to a fraction of the amount. They completely understand how overwhelming all this can be. Their team walks you right through the process step by step, so you're never in the dark about what's happening, and they move fast to stop or prevent things like liens, wage garnishments, and those penalties that just keep piling up. The IRS has stepped up their collection efforts lately, but Priority Tax Relief can step in before things escalate. They're offering a free consultation with no upfront fees and no obligation. Just go to PriorityTaxRelief.com/Ben. That's PriorityTaxRelief.com/Ben and see how they can help you get this resolved. Also, as an advocate for truth, you know that women shouldn't have to share locker rooms with men. Women shouldn't have to compete against male athletes, and they shouldn't be punished for speaking the truth. But across America, that is exactly what has been happening. Men are being allowed to compete in women's sports, robbing girls of scholarships, medals, titles, and safety. Now, for the first time in history, the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to hear two cases, West Virginia versus BPJ and Little versus Hecox on January 13th, that could decide the future of women's sports nationwide. It could be a watershed moment in the fight to protect biological reality and fairness. Alliance Defending Freedom needs your voice today. Visit joinadf.com/Ben or text Ben to 83848 to add your name to their declaration and side with truth and fairness. That's joinadf.com/Ben or text Ben to 83848. What starts in women's sports spreads to schools, medicine, and parental rights. This is our moment to push back. Stand with Alliance Defending Freedom today. They do extraordinary work. Go check them out right now. Alliance Defending Freedom, fighting the battles on the front line for America's future. That's Alliance Defending Freedom. Meanwhile, a shock poll is out showing Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez defeating J.D. Vance in a presidential race, 2028 presidential race, 51-49. Now, that is inside the margin of error, but that in and of itself should scare the hell out of Republicans if the poll is in any way accurate. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, of course, I've said, is being underrated as a candidate. She also happens to be the most radical Democrat in the possible field. The fact that she is even in spitting distance of the vice president of the United States suggests either that Republicans are in for a rough ride generally in 2028, or that there needs to be some course correction politically for Vice President Vance's incipient campaign. AOC was asked directly about this, and she said, of course, I would stomp him, which, of course, you would expect her to say.
Do you think that you could beat J.D. Vance in a head-to-head race for president, as polling suggests, in 2028?
Listen, these polls, like 3 years out, are, they are what they are. But let the record show, I would stomp him.
Okay, now, of course, she's sort of half joking. With that said, she is not the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination right now by the polling data. She is clocking in the Real Clear Politics polling average, and of course, it is very early right now. She is clocking in the Real Clear Politics polling average and in most of the polls in fourth place in the Democratic primary general vote. Gavin Newsom right now is the heavy favorite. Kamala Harris is still polling high, but that's for a hot moment because she was the last nominee. She is not going to end up as the Democratic nominee. The California governor has been running very obviously for president for at least a couple of years now. Pete Buttigieg is holding down that third place slot, but he has a ceiling. He's probably not going any higher than where he currently is. Ocasio-Cortez could theoretically pick up more of the Bernie Sanders vote, which is kind of sitting outside and waiting to see who runs at this point. With that said, if the Democrats are that competitive with the Republicans already, that, of course, is a very bad sign, and it shows the necessity for a sort of political change. And this does mean that on the right side of the aisle, there needs to be some reckoning with the idea that the era of Donald Trump running at the top of the ticket is now over. He is not going to be on the ballot in 2026, and he will not be on the ballot in 2028, despite the most fond wishes of some people who I generally like Alan Dershowitz. It ain't happening. The president of the United States is constitutionally forbidden from running for a third term. And so that means that the next candidate will not be Donald Trump. And whoever that candidate is going to have to craft his own coalition. I'm going to say this over and over and over again. No one inherits someone else's coalition. If they do, it is usually a smaller coalition. George H.W. Bush in 1988 inherited the Reagan coalition, and he performed less well than Reagan did in 1984. In 2016, Hillary Clinton tried to inherit the Obama coalition, and she significantly underperformed Barack Obama. If you take somebody else's coalition and you shrink it, you are likely to lose, or at least not to perform as well, obviously. And that's particularly true in our very tight elections. We've been having tight elections in this country for basically the last 24 years. Going all the way back to 2000. It's been a long time since we've had a true blowout election. You could say that 2008 was kind of a blowout election for Barack Obama. That's an exception to the rule. 2012, while it was a solid victory for Obama in the Electoral College, was a fairly tight race the entire way. And obviously, 2000 was an extraordinarily tight race. 2004 was a very tight race. 2016 was an incredibly tight race. 2020 was a tight race. 2024 was a tight race. None of these races could be considered blowouts. Republicans can't afford to drop even 2 percentage points and win national elections. And so that means that Vice President Vance is going to have to look at his own coalition building skills and figure out what coalition he believes he will be able to bring to the ballot box. And that is why I think a lot of the very online chatter that's been happening right now on the right, the sort of triumphalist attempt to transform the nature of how Americans think about Americanism, it is politically inept. What I mean by this is there's a big conversation that's currently happening on the right about what is an American? What is an American? Now, traditionally, when I was growing up, and I think for most of modern conservative history, the answer to what is an American is a person who lives in America, was born here traditionally, or immigrates to the United States, imbibes from the well of and assimilates to the values of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. That would be sort of the very short synopsis of what is an American. There's been an attempt, because people are rebelling now against the sort of creedal notion of Americanism, that ideas have anything to do with being an American. And I think that is a response to the fact that the left basically said that what is an American? Anyone who's here. And so what members of the right are now saying is it's not anyone who's here. It's people who historically are from here. But neither of those answers is correct. The actual answer is people who wish to join the American experiment and then assimilate to Anglo-American traditions and Judeo-Christian values. Right? Those are traditionally the people who become Americans. And the history of America is which people can come here and do that. And that is why the genetic heritage of the United States is quite diverse. It's why only a very small percentage of Americans can trace their ancestry all the way back to the Mayflower. Well, this is all coming to a head because there are a lot of Republicans, again, who are starting to push the idea that that creedal idea, Declaration of Independence, Constitution of the United States, Anglo-American values in terms of legality, property rights, general religious tenor, right, that all of that ought to be pushed to the side in favor of some sort of, quote unquote, heritage Americanism. And again, that's pretty ill-defined because it's difficult to explain why, because your great-great-great-great-great-grandfather got here, that is somehow better than someone else's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather getting here. As though the more greats you have in the grandfather, the more American you are. To a certain extent, that's kind of stolen valor because you're not the one who got here. It was one of your ancestors who got here. But the reality is that is a losing political proposition. Forget about the morality of it or even the ideology of it. That is a losing political proposition that radically shrinks your base. It does. President Trump won a historic number of Hispanic votes for a Republican. in the last election cycle. Many of the Hispanic voters that he's winning are first generation or second generation Americans. If you say that the longer you're in the country, the more American you are alienating your potential voters. Because it turns out a lot of people in the United States got here in the course of the last 150 years. Again, it is a mistake to do the routine that you are now seeing on a political level. And the more you talk about it, the more you're alienating people. And if J.D. Vance loses Latino votes from President Trump, if he loses black votes from President Trump, if he loses female votes from President Trump, if he loses blue-collar votes from President Trump, he needs to make all this up somewhere. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for governor of Ohio, has what I think is a truly good piece at the New York Times titled, "What is an American?" And he says there are two competing visions now emerging on the American right, and they're incompatible. One vision of American identity is based on lineage, blood, and soil. Inherited attributes matter most. The purest form of an American is a so-called heritage American, one whose ancestry traces back to the founding of the United States or earlier. This view is now popularized by the Groyper right, a rapidly ascendant online movement that argues for the creation of a white-centric identity. This is a predictable response, one that I anticipated in my 2022 book, Nation of Victims, to anti-white discrimination over the last half-decade, and it is no longer just a fringe viewpoint. The alternative, and, says Vivek Ramaswamy, in my view, correct vision of American identity is based on ideals. Americanness isn't a scalar quality that varies based on your ancestry. It's binary. Either you're an American or you're not. You're an American if you believe in the rule of law, in freedom of conscience, and freedom of expression, in colorblind meritocracy, in the U.S. Constitution, in the American dream, and if you are a citizen who swears exclusive allegiance to our nation. As Ronald Reagan quipped, you can go live in France, but you can't become a Frenchman. But anyone from any corner of the world can come to live in the United States and become an American. Now, what Vivek is saying here is correct. The attack on so-called creedal Americanism has been the idea that you can't shut the door based on creed. That's not true. Of course you can. That's why it matters where immigrants are coming from. It's why I am very much a fan of creedal Americanism, because America is exceptional and different. When I say American exceptionalism, I don't mean like Barack Obama, that Americans believe in American exceptionalism like Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism or Japanese believe in Japanese exceptionalism. America is, in fact, different. It is a nation based on an idea, not an idea based on a nation. It is the only state that was literally formed based on a set of ideas. Now, of course, many of the people who formed those ideas had a common ancestry. Many didn't, by the way. We now tend to obliterate all those differences because they seem minor in comparison to the sort of ethnic diversity of the United States. But there's some pretty significant conflict between, say, Scotch-Irish immigrants to the United States at the founding and English immigrants to the United States at the founding, or Dutch immigrants to the United States at the founding, for that matter. New York was originally New Amsterdam, of course. But of course, creedal Americanism can serve as a litmus test as to whether someone ought to become an American. And we can measure that, and we can bar people who are unlikely to assimilate. Vivek says, no matter your ancestry, if you wait your turn and obtain citizenship, you're every bit as American as a Mayflower descendant, as long as you subscribe to the creed of the American founding and the culture that was born of it. This is what makes American exceptionalism possible, and this is right. This is correct. One of the reasons that America is, in fact, so powerful is specifically because we can brain drain everywhere else. We can values drain everywhere else. We can become the world center of commerce and the world center of small r republicanism. We can do all those things because we can be a magnet for those things. The divide between these two views, says Ramaswamy, is more foundational than policy divides between Republicans and Democrats. Older Republicans who may doubt the rising prevalence of the blood and soil view should think again. My social media feeds are littered with hundreds of slurs, most from accounts that I don't recognize, about the Pajeets and street bleepers and calls to deport me back to India. I was born and raised in Cincinnati and have never resided outside the United States. This new online right movement doesn't represent the views of most real-world Republican voters. Take it from the son of Indian immigrants who's dominating polling in Ohio's GOP primary for governor. But as one of the most vocal opponents of left-wing identity politics, I now see a real reluctance from my former anti-woke peers to criticize the new identity politics on the right. And good for Vivek for writing this, because this is exactly right. He says this pattern eerily mirrors the hesitance of prominent Democrats to criticize woke excess in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. This, of course, is exactly right. So what's the solution? Says Ramaswamy, we need to imagine a new American dream that delivers economic empowerment while also filling the next generation's hunger for purpose and belonging. To achieve that vision, 4 conditions must be met. First, conservative leaders should condemn without hedging Groyper transgressions. That doesn't mean censorship. It means moral clarity instead of indulgence. Yes. Second, reduce cost of living. States can deliver quick wins, drive down home prices by eliminating local land use restrictions to increase housing supply, reduce property tax burdens, etc., etc. Third, create broad-based participation in wealth generation from stock market gains. Meaning, we should have what are now being called the Trump accounts. And fourth, provide America the shared national project we badly need. America has a greater purpose in the world than what we have embodied thus far in the 21st century. Americans of all stripes long to be reminded of it through a modern-day equivalent of the Apollo mission. Now, again, I think that there's truth to this, that building big things tends to inspire the imagination. Now, I don't think that that is a prereq. I think that an inspired vision for Americans is the dream. The dream, the American dream is the inspiring thing. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. And let's be real about young Americans. The opportunity is, in fact, in your hands. There are people out there who are going to lie to you. They're going to tell you you can't succeed in the United States. They're going to tell you that because it makes them stronger and them more powerful and them richer. But it's going to make your life worse and poorer. You can, in fact, succeed. You've been handed the opportunity, an opportunity that hundreds of millions, billions of people worldwide would kill to get. That is an opportunity that you were born into in the United States or immigrated to. And to pretend that this system is what is holding you down, absent a specific policy that you would like to change, and then we can all get on board. But a generalized grievance is not going to make your life better. And people who pander to you by telling you that failure is a result of generalized grievance without a solution, they are making your life actively worse. They're destroying your opportunity, and they're destroying the American spirit. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, true self-reliance begins with taking control of your own health. Our sponsor, Armra Colostrum, harnesses nature's original blueprint for resilience. Packed with over 400 bioactive nutrients, colostrum fortifies your gut and strengthens your immune system from the cellular level up. When you invest in your health, you invest in your ability to show up fully, think clearly, and stay in control, no matter what comes your way. Look, our bodies are under constant assault. Toxins, processed foods, relentless stress. Your gut is your first line of defense. Most supplements only address part of the problem. Armra Colostrum is different. This isn't just another supplement. It's a bioactive whole food, a pure concentrate of bovine colostrum that's sustainably sourced with a commitment to calf-first sourcing. It's packed with over 400 bioactive nutrients that fortify your entire gut wall system, not just one piece. This means balanced and strengthened immune health, better digestion, less bloating, and support for healthy metabolism and fat burning from the inside out. Elite athletes have been using colostrum for years because it enhances nutrient absorption, builds lean muscle, and speeds recovery. But the benefits go even deeper. Cellular level support for hair, skin, energy, everything. This isn't processed or manipulated. It's pure, potent, and natural. Your body's blueprint for rebuilding itself the way it was designed to function. 4 daily servings, infinite benefits. We've worked out a special offer for my audience. Receive 30% off your first subscription order. Go to armra.com/Shapiro or enter Shapiro to get 30% off your first subscription order. That's armra.com/Shapiro. Also, this episode is sponsored by our friends at Cars for Kids. Okay, folks, quick holiday reality check. That prep list is long, the calendar is short, the guests are basically en route. Now, maybe you've got something else sitting out there you keep ignoring. A car, a boat, maybe an old vehicle just hogging the driveway. It's not helping you. It's just taking up space and losing value. Donate it to Cars for Kids. Cars for Kids makes all of this super easy. You go online, they schedule a free pickup at your convenience, and they'll tow away any old vehicle you've got sitting around. Cars for Kids then takes care of all the paperwork and the logistics. You walk away with a tax-deductible receipt, a vacation voucher, and space in your driveway for your guests. So, act right now. Call 1-877-CARS-FOR-KIDS or donate online at carsforkids.org/Ben. That's carsforkids.org/Ben. Cars with a K. And yes, you should hurry. Time is running out for that 2025 tax deduction. Go check them out right now. That's carsforkids.org/Ben. 1-877-CARS-FOR-KIDS. You know the song. You can hear it in your head right now. So why not just go do the thing? Get rid of that old car. carsforkids.org/Ben. Alrighty. Last night, the president of the United States, there were people online again who were predicting that he was going to declare war with Venezuela or something that, of course, turned out to be untrue, as are many of their predictions. It is true, however, that the president is creating more of a blockade on Venezuela. The president is basically trying to stop the shipping of so-called ghost ships out of Venezuela that are loaded with oil for illegal crimes in violation of international law. President Trump is very much focused on the oil in Venezuela, which, by the way, is correct. I know there are people who are uptight about this. Why? Venezuela was reliant largely on American companies to build their oil industry, and then they nationalized their oil industry and ran their country directly into the ground. And President Trump says, we built it and you took it and you've destroyed your country in the process. The president is not wrong here.
It's a blockade. Not going to let anybody going through that shouldn't be going through. You remember they took all of our energy rights. They took all of our oil from not that long ago, and we want it back. But they took it. They illegally took it.
The president then put out a statement on Truth Social, quote, Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before. He added he is ordering a total and complete blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers going into and out of Venezuela. And he argued that Maduro's government is using oil revenue to finance illicit operations, including drug terrorism. The United States has already sanctioned 3 of Maduro's nephews, according to NBC News, and repeatedly conducted deadly military strikes against boats from the Caribbean that it alleges are carrying drugs. Venezuela responded by accusing Trump of violating international law, free trade, and the principle of free navigation. Okay, Venezuela, you commies. You commie Iranian dictatorship-loving horror show. It added on his social media, he assumes that Venezuela's oil, land, and mineral wealth are his property. No, actually, he assumes that if we drilled for the oil and helped your industry and then you nationalized it, and stole it on behalf of your communist dictatorship, that's a bad thing. Maduro's government plans to denounce the situation before the United Nations. Well, slow clap for you guys. Congrats. Now, there are a lot of people who are claiming that President Trump is going to launch a full-scale military invasion of Venezuela. No, he's not. No, he's not. Stop it. Stop being stupid. Representative Jason Crow, Democrat of Colorado, is saying that.
As the president has talked about U.S. involvement in land, is it clear to you what that would look like to you, U.S. involvement in a land war in Venezuela, how that would play out?
Well, that would be complete insanity. We've spent the last 25 years, trillions of dollars, thousands of American lives, tens of thousands of Americans wounded with stress and invisible and visible scars of these battles. Hundreds of thousands of people died around the world in these conflicts. And most of these conflicts ended poorly, right? Terrorism is still alive and well. We pulled out of Afghanistan. We saw how poorly that went. Iraq did not go well. The United States needs to get out of the regime change business.
Okay, actually, I don't think the United States needs to get out of the regime change business. If by that he means that we should not root for certain regimes to change. We certainly should not invade Venezuela with hundreds of thousands of troops, if that's what he's talking about. But I really don't think that President Trump is going for that. Why are you guys standing for the Venezuelan regime? And what President Trump is pretty obviously doing is cutting off the lifeblood of the Venezuelan economy and creating internal pressures inside the country for some sort of military coup or for a popular uprising to depose the dictator. Why is that bad? Like, let's be real about what he's doing. He is not talking about using F-16s to take out Maduro. He's not talking about unleashing the 101st Airborne. That's not what he's talking about. Ilhan Omar, of course, another big defender of the Marxist regime in Venezuela.
The answer is that this is not about drugs. This is about regime change. And we also have the White House chief of staff on record saying that this is about regime change. It has nothing to do with drugs.
Well, I mean, I assume that it has to do with both regime change and drugs. But again, this notion that the United States is about to launch some sort of massive ground-scale invasion into Venezuela is not correct. That, of course, is not correct. But economic pressure on Venezuela, I really don't see the problem, to be quite honest with you. Meanwhile, Democrats continue to focus like a laser beam on the fact that Pete Hegseth's Department of Defense launched a second strike at a drug boat in international waters. Representative Benny Thompson, who was last seen claiming that the shooting of a couple of National Guard members was a sort of bizarre accident. Well, now he's back and he's claiming that Trump's boat bombings are illegal.
We are a nation of laws. The Trump administration's boat bombings are illegal under U.S. and international laws. Simply put, these are war crimes. Further, the administration has failed to provide Congress with basic information, even as Trump directs a massive buildup of U.S. forces and threatens war. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, those of us who've been in so-called classified briefings still have not received any additional information beyond what's already in the eyes of the public and on TV. It's our duty as a Congress to rein in the lawless administration and prevent an illegal war.
Also, meanwhile, Chuck Schumer is claiming that the video of the boat strike turned his stomach. It turned his... Okay, I mean, you want to go with blowing up drug boats is bad. I guess that's a take.
The unedited video of what happened on September 2nd. I've seen it. It turns your stomach. It is awful. And people should see it. What the hell is Hegseth hiding? His excuse about classification? It's false.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I guess if they want to run with this, they can. The Senate did pass a Pentagon bill pressing Pete Hegseth to disclose boat strike evidence on Wednesday, according to the Washington Post. It was an addendum to the $900 billion defense policy bill. It advanced 77-20. So I assume that at some point the footage will come out, and then we'll find out whether, in fact, the people on the boat were signaling others to be picked up. That's sort of the question at issue, legally speaking. Is somebody considered hors de combat when their boat gets wrecked? Or could they get back in the fight by getting on another boat, calling somebody? Is the boat still salvageable? And whatnot. By the way, the original accusation, which was that Pete Hegseth said kill everyone and then stood there while they nuked these people, is false. And that was already reported by the New York Times. So the original report from the Washington Post made a claim that has already been specifically debunked by the New York Times. Okay, meanwhile, in other Trump administration news, Dan Bongino says he will step down from the FBI in January, according to the New York Times. He said on Wednesday he would step down next month, bringing an end to his brief but tumultuous stint at the Bureau. He wrote on social media, "I will be leaving my position with the FBI in January." He announced this. He said, "I want to thank President Trump, AG Bondi, and Director Patel for the opportunity to serve with purpose. Most importantly, I want to thank you, my fellow Americans, for the privilege to serve you. God bless America and all those who defend her." Now, again, I think that Dan deserves extraordinary praise for what he's done over the course of the last year. He gave up legitimately tens of millions of dollars to go into public service for no reason other than his own patriotism. You can't name a reason why he would do it other than he wanted to help the country. He certainly didn't do it for the money. He certainly didn't do it for the love. And Dan has taken some real hits from dishonest people claiming that he abandoned his position as a person who wants to get to the truth. And by the way, full credit to Dan for telling the truth, even when it was not in his political interest to do so. I mean, Dan had been one of the lead purveyors of much of the questioning surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, but it was Dan who had to do that investigation and look into all the evidence and then tell the truth to the American people. That's a hard job. Telling the truth to the American people is a much more difficult job, as it turns out, than lying to them and telling them what they want to hear, particularly if they're in your base. Dan deserves enormous credit for that. Dan deserves huge credit for being instrumental in the arrest of the January 6th pipe bomber. Again, the ire that you see for Dan online, I think a lot of it is sort of competitive hatred for Dan. It's coming from other people who are afraid he's going to come back to his podcast and do really well. I hope he comes back to his podcast, and I hope he does do really well, because Dan is a very talented guy. But again, what Dan deserves most of all is thanks for having put aside his own personal interests on behalf of the country, even if it was for a year. Most people don't do that, and that is not an easy decision to make. Well, in other news, Zohran Mamdani's tenure is going exactly how you thought it would. According to the New York Post, Mamdani has now tapped a controversial lawyer who defended an al-Qaeda terrorist and a radical anti-Israel campus leader at Columbia for a high-ranking position at City Hall. How exciting. Ramzi Qassem, who is also a law professor at City University of New York and a member of Mamdani's transition team for legal affairs, is the top candidate for chief counsel, the most important advisory role in the mayor's office. Can't see how this would go wrong. In addition to defending Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University protest leader, who was also engaged in trespass and violation of law, Qassem helped to defend terrorist Ahmed al-Darbi, an al-Qaeda member who was convicted in 2017 of bombing a French oil tanker off the coast of Yemen in 2002. All this, of course, follows a pattern for Zohran Mamdani. He was supposed to be a moderate. Yeah, that's not happening so much. Not really seeing it. Meanwhile, he appeared with Trevor Noah who apparently is still in the media. I didn't even realize that Trevor was still active. Good for you, Trevor. And he declared that free buses are going to lower crime. Okay, Charlie, we'll see how that works out for you.
When we made those bus routes free after a year, assaults on bus drivers dropped by 38.9%.
On the bus drivers?
On the bus drivers. Because unlike the train, the act of fare collection on the bus happens on the bus.
Yeah, it's their job,
And bus drivers and unions have shared anecdotally that about 50% of assaults happen around the fare box. So when you eliminate the fare box, you make for a safer experience for the bus driver, for everyone on the bus.
Yeah.
It's going to be so safe when nobody has to worry about the fares and when people are just riding around the buses and using them as homeless encampments. If there's one thing that Zoran Mamdani is going to bring, it's going to be safety to New York City. Man, you guys, you voted for this, and now you're going to get it good and hard. That's the theory of democracy in a nutshell. He also described to Trevor Noah what socialism means. You'll notice that he doesn't actually define what socialism means. This is a favorite habit of socialists, is to say things like, if socialism means that everybody lives a better life and is richer, then I'm a socialist. It's like, well, no, that's not what socialism means. It actually has a definition. Here is Zoran Mamdani doing his best.
But I think, many people have caricatures in their head as to what it means.
Yeah.
I often turn to Dr. King to describe socialism. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. It comes back to dignity. It comes back to ensuring that whatever you need to live a dignified life, that you have that. You should not be priced out of a necessity. We're not talking about want or like. We're talking about need. You should not be priced out of being able to have a home to call your own, of being able to send your kid to school, being able to ride the bus. And I've found actually that when you're speaking to New Yorkers one-to-one, they've actually had far fewer questions of how I describe my politics and far more of, does my politics include them? Are their struggles part of my focus? And I've found that there are many people who might describe themselves in a different way, but when I speak about what this would mean for New York City, they start to see themselves in that vision. And that's, I think, the key of this is, how is this a politics that actually reflects the struggles of working people?
God, the irritation of people like Mamdani, this is crap. I mean, Mamdani and Sanders, they all do this routine. The routine is, here's something I wish everybody had. And if I believe that everybody should have it, then they should have it. Now, they never tell you how they're going to get from point A to point B. Because what socialists actually believe is if everyone deserves a house, then what that means is we should seize the means of production and we should either tax the living hell out of people and then build houses and just give them to people, which was called the affordable housing projects of the 1960s and 70s, gigantic failure. Or we should seize current housing stock and just put people in those houses. And these programs invariably end with failure. I want people to have houses too. And the way that you get more people in more houses is with additional supply. And you know what's a great way to create better houses, additional houses, houses with more amenities, houses that aren't the crap boxes that your grandparents owned in the middle of Peoria in 1952, which were just brick structures with no internal air conditioning and half the time no toilet? You know what's the best way to do that? Market economics. Market economics. So no, socialism isn't just a quote-unquote call for you to have things. It's an actual program for how to achieve that. And that program is always ugly and it's always a failure. And we'll see how it works out for New Yorkers. Honestly, Mamdani's saving grace is that he's not going to be able to do all the things that he says he wants to do. All right, coming up, we're going to jump into the vaunted Ben Shapiro Show mailbag. Remember, you have to be a subscriber in order to access the mailbag and become part of the show. Head on over to dailywire.com right now to subscribe.
As more Epstein files drop, some of the biggest conspiracy theorists are ensnared in the scandal itself. Plus, we get to Marjorie Taylor Greene rebelling against the president of the United States and the stock market taking a tumble. What comes next? First, tomorrow night, join me, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, and Andrew Klavan for a new live episode of Friendly Fire. Get there early because right before the show starts, we are announcing the winners of our lifetime membership sweepstakes. If you downloaded the Daily Wire Plus app and hit follow under my profile, make sure you're here because I might be calling your name right before the show begins. Each of us has one lifetime membership to give away. Tomorrow night, you'll hear all 4 winners announced before we go live at 7 p.m. Eastern. After that, we get straight into the discussions, the arguments, the stories dominating the news cycle. Do not miss Friendly Fire tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. Well, there's something very fishy about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And no, of course, I'm not talking about just the scandal itself, which, of course, remains incredibly fishy. We don't know where Jeffrey Epstein got his gigantic oodles of money in the first place. We don't know whom he was trafficking to, if anyone besides himself. we don't know a lot of things about Jeffrey Epstein. But what I mean here is that the response to Jeffrey Epstein has been quite fascinating. Many of the figures who have been largely associated with the question asking about Jeffrey Epstein, it turns out that some of them are, in fact, associates of Jeffrey Epstein. And this is where things start to get weird in conspiracy land, because conspiracy land suggests that there are the people who are in on it, and then there are the people who are outside attempting to crack the code on the conspiracy. But when you are talking about a hoax, and here we're not saying that everything associated with Jeffrey Epstein is a hoax. I'm talking about the political op directed at President Trump, specifically regarding Jeffrey Epstein. One of the ways you can tell when people are, quote unquote, in on the hoax is when they themselves were close associates of the person at issue. And now they've decided to try and weaponize that same person as a weapon against the people who they are targeting. Case in point, Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon, who I've known Steve for a very, very long time. It's currently 2025. I believe I first met Steve in 2012. So I've known Steve for 13 years or so. And yeah, I knew him back when he was at Breitbart, and I was at Breitbart as well. And we'll say that he's not the easiest human being, to put it mildly. Steve Bannon has a long history of attempting to associate himself with more powerful people, glomming onto them, and then sort of making his way up the chain. So a bit of career background on Steve Bannon, at least politically. He made a documentary about then Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. After that documentary was made, he then used that as a sort of entree card to make a documentary about Sarah Palin. After that documentary was made, he then used that as an entree card to make a documentary about Andrew Breitbart. He used that documentary in order to become a prominent person at Breitbart itself when Andrew unfortunately passed away. And then he used that position in order to leverage a position for himself in the first Trump administration. He, of course, ended up being ousted by the first Trump administration. President Trump called him Sloppy Steve, rather famously. He then went through a period in the wilderness where he was associating with some rather shady figures. He ended up doing a very short stint of jail time. And now, of course, he has his show, The War Room, where the media call him up routinely for quasi-leaks, because I'm not sure how really empowered his access is to the administration, but they're constantly using him, the media, as a sort of window into the dark side of the Trump administration, which is, of course, something that Steve really loves. Now, the reason that Steve has become an issue is because Steve, along with many other people who are attempting to wrest control of the MAGA movement away from President Trump, their assumption is that President Trump is in the waning days of his political power, that President Trump is now close to being, if he is not already, a lame duck. And that means that the future of the Republican Party is going to be fought in an internecine war. And that's going to involve a war of all against all, people who have different perspectives on foreign policy, different perspectives on economics. And Steve believes, presumably, that he is going to have a heavy voice in deciding the future of the MAGA movement without President Trump. Now, let me be clear. There is no MAGA movement without President Trump. It does not exist. President Trump is MAGA. President Trump, as I have said before, is sui generis. It is the president of the United States who decides the direction of MAGA. And every attempt to intellectualize or philosophize President Trump, to turn his impulses, to turn his instincts into a coherent political program, those have all failed. Because again, the president holds a bunch of different conflicting thoughts at the same time, and then he tends to come down on the side of pragmatic populism. And by this, I mean that he will try things, and if they don't work, he will then move away from them. He is not ideological. And so any attempt to peg President Trump to a quote-unquote MAGA ideology is destined to fail, because President Trump could at one point articulate a version of MAGA in which support for Ukraine is bad. And then when Russia is intransigent, he could articulate a version of MAGA in which support for Ukraine is good, just to take an obvious example. He could do the same thing with support for particular business people. He can flip on a dime, because President Trump, again, is not just the leader of MAGA, he is the definition of MAGA. There is no MAGA aside from President Trump. He's very much like Barack Obama in this way. Barack Obama was able to kind of gloss over all of the various divisions inside the Democratic Party without necessarily a cohesive program. Now, Obama was much more intellectually consistent and ideological in his approach than Donald Trump has been. But all attempts to sort of boil Trump down into a philosophical or ideological package, which can then be transferred over to another candidate, whether that candidate is J.D. Vance, or whether it is Ted Cruz, or whether it is Steve Bannon, or whether it is somebody else, that is bound to fail because President Trump is too big for that. You can't just take what he is, sort of shrink wrap it, put it in an ideological box, and then hand it over to the next guy. So one of the things that Steve Bannon has been trying to do for years is claim that he's sort of the intellectual mover and shaker behind MAGA, which of course is really silly. It's really silly. There is no shadow president to President Trump. There is no one who is defining his program except for President Trump. The reason I bring this up is because Steve Bannon, among many other people, being opposed to some elements of Trump's agenda and trying to run a sort of bizarre op inside the Republican Party to remove support from Trump and move it over to his version of MAGA, he, among other people, has been quite vocal about the so-called Epstein scandal. He's been very vocal about this. He's talked about it a lot. Well, it turns out, again, that so much of what is happening right now is just fibbery. According to the UK Guardian, hundreds of texts over almost a year show MAGA influencer Steve Bannon and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein workshopping legal and media strategies to protect Epstein from the legal and publicity quagmire that enveloped him in the last year of his life. The texts, released by the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday, show that as early as June 2018, the pair were devising responses to the gathering storm of public outrage about Epstein's criminal history, his favorable treatment by the justice system, and his friendships with powerful figures in business, politics, and academia. Remember, that's 2018. 2018. Okay, that is 10 years after Jeffrey Epstein's first conviction, after the controversial plea deal that he cut with Alex Acosta. That's 10 years later. Okay, we're not talking about Donald Trump hobnobbing with Jeffrey Epstein in the late 90s. We're not talking about going to parties with Jeffrey Epstein at Mar-a-Lago in 2004. We are talking about 10 years after it was obvious to everyone that Jeffrey Epstein was, in fact, a pedophile. That 10 years after that, he was acting not just as a sort of friend, but as a confidant and as a PR advisor, which says something about somebody. If you're acting as a confidant and PR advisor to a convicted sex offender like Jeffrey Epstein, who is well known to be into underage girls, if that is, I don't know what that says about you or why you should have any level of authority in any future Republican Party. This seems to me quite damning. The texts released by the House Oversight Committee show as early as 2018 that pair were devising responses to the gathering storm of public outrage about Epstein's criminal history, his favorable treatment by the justice system, and his friendships with powerful figures in business, politics, and academia. Bannon conspiratorially described the renewed scrutiny of Epstein as a sophisticated op, and over time he counseled Epstein in his adversarial responses to media outlets, the justice system, and his victims. All the while, both men were also strategizing how best to promote Bannon's right-wing populist agenda and the political fortunes of its standard-bearer, Donald Trump. Bannon's identity in the threads, according to The Guardian, cited in this reporting, is clear from contextual clues, including his documented activities at the time, details of his business and media pursuits, and other disclosures. In one document, the senator's phone number is not redacted. It's the same number linked to Bannon in a legal case against Trump advisor Roger Stone. The men were discussing Epstein's problems even before he came to broader public awareness as a notorious sex criminal with odd connections to the Trump administration. Bannon left the Trump White House in late summer 2017, and by 2018, he was hanging out and texting with Jeffrey Epstein about how to rehab Jeffrey Epstein. On June 22nd, 2018, days after Jeffrey Epstein had been the focus of an anti-Trump protest at a Trump speech, the men began discussing the scandal that was beginning to loom over Epstein. At first, they treated it as a publicity problem, with Bannon seeing it as an orchestrated campaign. Bannon asked Epstein, "Who is running this op on you? Something serious going on." Epstein replied, "First a protest at Clinton and then at Trump. Lots of people very angry at our friendship." Bannon responded, "It's an op, dude. I do this for a living. The pieces that are dropping are deeply researched," adding, "This is sophisticated op." On December 18th, an unknown correspondent tried to reassure Epstein, writing, quote, "It will all blow over. They're really just trying to take down Trump and doing whatever they can to do that." Epstein responded, "Yes, thanks. It's wild because I am the one able to take him down." In early February 2019, Bannon opened an exchange on the developing story by linking to an item at the controversial news site Zero Hedge that quoted then Republican Senator Ben Sasse on the matter. And he asked Bannon on advice for how to respond. "Continue to ignore, attack, op-ed, not my skill set." Bannon said, "That drives it a week." Okay, so again, they were having these back and forths in which he was attempting to guide Epstein. And we know for a fact that there are hours and hours of tape between Epstein and Bannon that have not yet been released, which is strange, is it not? Bannon said, "Should it be an interview format, interviewed by, or just me, speaking to the camera? Humor, apology, how did I get rich? Topics." That's Epstein asking Bannon for advice. They spoke frequently on the phone, apparently. Again, what does this mean? It means that certain people are less trustworthy than others in political media. And the fact that Steve Bannon has spent, again, his entire career trying to find more powerful people to quote unquote advise and glom onto in order to advance his own agenda And that didn't even stop at the doorway of Jeffrey Epstein. It says something about him and about his attempts to hijack the MAGA movement beyond President Trump. Already coming up, more on the Epstein op. And it really is, at this point, an op led by many of the people who are literally involved with Jeffrey Epstein. Plus, we'll be joined by Scott Jennings, who has a brand new book out. First, are you aware of House Bill Section 702? It extends the rights of government agencies to legally monitor American citizens without requiring a warrant. Congress just renewed it for another couple of years. While we should demand better privacy protections from our government, it's important to take steps to protect yourself in the meantime. One significant way your privacy is compromised is through your browsing history. Your internet service provider tracks every website you visit, and if you live in America, they can legally share your data with other companies and government agencies. That's where ExpressVPN comes in. ExpressVPN is a virtual private network that reroutes all of my internet activity through secure encrypted channels. This means no one, not government entities, data brokers, even my internet service provider, can access my online activity. I use ExpressVPN all the time. I've been traveling a lot for the show, doing show research and all the rest. Nobody should be looking at my data. It's my business. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, the number that identifies you online, and allows data brokers to create a profile of your activities. It's also incredibly user-friendly, requiring just one tap to activate across devices on up to 14 devices at once. We need to demand a better government, of course, but until we can change all of that, protect yourself the way I do with ExpressVPN. Right now, if you head on over to expressvpn.com/Ben, you can get 4 extra months of privacy. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. Also, if you're ever worried about the safety of your home, you need to hear about SimpliSafe and their early access Black Friday sale. Traditional security systems only respond after someone has already broken into your home. SimpliSafe works differently. With Active Guard outdoor protection, AI-powered cameras can detect threats while intruders are still outside and immediately alert real security agents who spring into action. Here's what makes this a true game changer. Those agents don't just watch, they actively confront the intruder in real time, speaking directly to them through the camera to let them know they're being watched, that police are on the way, if necessary, triggering a loud siren and spotlight. While other systems have cameras that let you talk to intruders yourself, they depend on you seeing the alert in the first place. SimpliSafe's monitoring agents have your back 24/7, confronting threats even when you're not available, which means they can actually stop crimes before they happen. We've got SimpliSafe here for the studio. Got a lot of, nice, expensive equipment here. I'm not worried about whether it's here in the morning because of SimpliSafe. Plus, there are no long-term contracts or hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. It's no wonder they've been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News & World Report for 5 years running. Don't miss out on SimpliSafe's biggest sale of the year, 60% off. Right now, our listeners can save 60% off on a SimpliSafe home security system at simplisafe.com/Shapiro. That's simplisafe.com/Shapiro. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. So here, for example, was Steve Bannon over the summer at TPUSA when everybody else was also promoting these conspiracy theories about Jeffrey Epstein, intelligence agencies, and all that. Here's Jeffrey Epstein's friend and quasi-fixer, Steve Bannon, doing the exact same thing.
Epstein is a key that picks the lock on so many things, not just individuals, but also institutions, intelligence institutions, foreign governments, and who was working with him on our intelligence apparatus and in our government.
Now, in fact, that's not even restricted to Steve Bannon. We are now finding out, for example, that Stacey Plaskett, the U.S. Virgin Island non-voting delegate who's a Democrat, was messaging with Epstein in February 2019 while a hearing into Trump was ongoing. And she even asked Epstein for guidance in one message, according to the Washington Post. Her office confirmed to the paper that she had received texts from Epstein. So again, these sort of relationships that people had with Jeffrey Epstein, it's quite fascinating. It's on both sides of the aisle, obviously. And there is something dishonest about you having a close personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, and then turning around and spouting conspiracy theories about Jeffrey Epstein that you could yourself easily weigh in on. Pretty fascinating. Now, Democrats are trying to use the Epstein situation as a way to harm President Trump, trying to hurt President Trump. Chuck Schumer, the very endangered Senate minority leader who may be facing, he's going to retire. I mean, he's not going to run for re-election. Here he is suggesting that President Trump is hiding something.
Just, I guess, a question that's out there. Why wouldn't they have been released the last 4 years when President Biden was in office?
Well, that's the question every American is asking. Or not every American, but so many Americans are asking. What the hell is he hiding? Why doesn't he want them released? When you don't want something like this released, when even a whole lot of Republicans are calling for the release, his own party members, people ask the question, what's he hiding?
Okay, but this raises a question for Democrats, which is, what are Democrats hiding? So one reporter asked the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, who, as we'll get to in a minute, is going to face a primary challenger himself. The Democratic Party is coming apart at the seams. A reporter asked him, why exactly should Americans trust Democrats on Epstein when Democrats, like Stacey Plaskett, were texting Jeffrey Epstein?
Why should Americans trust you and House Democrats on the Jeffrey Epstein files when one of your own, Congresswoman Plaskett, was found to be texting with Jeffrey Epstein during a hearing, getting information from him, using that in her questioning during a congressional hearing, and at one point he tells her, "Good job."
This is a bipartisan effort to make sure that, consistent with what the survivors have requested, that there's full and complete transparency, and every single predator who may be in those Justice Department files doesn't escape accountability.
Okay, so one of the things I noticed is you not answering the question, House Minority Leader, and the finger wagging about how you're for full transparency. Fascinating, just fascinating. Meanwhile, speaking of full transparency, President Trump said yesterday that he would sign a bill to release the Epstein files. Here he was explaining.
So I'm for I don't. They can do whatever they want. We'll give them everything. Sure, I would. Let the Senate look at it. Let anybody look at it. But don't talk about it too much because, honestly, I don't want to take it away from us. It's really a Democrat problem. The Democrats were Epstein's friends.
Okay, so he then continued along these lines, the president. He said, the reason why I don't want to talk about this? Because it's a distraction from the things that are going on in actual Americans' lives.
All I want for people to recognize a great job that I've done on pricing, on affordability, because we brought prices way down, but they're going way lower, on energy, on ending 8 wars and another one coming pretty soon, I believe. We've done a great job. And I hate to see that deflect from the great job we've done.
Okay, so, the president of the United States right there. And again, he is not wrong, and he's also not wrong that there is, in fact, a coalition of people who wish to take him down and degrade his presidency, and that spans from the left to the right. So, for example, Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, he's now claiming that Trump chickened out. Okay, well, I mean, you can't really have it both ways here. Either President Trump desperately wanted to avoid transparency, or he's perfectly willing to do transparency, but he's doing the thing you want, so you call him a chicken? That's kind of a weird take.
Donald Trump appears to have chickened out on the Epstein scandal. He's caved. It's a complete and total surrender. Because as Democrats, we made clear from the very beginning, the survivors and the American people deserve full and complete transparency as it relates to the lives that were ruined by Jeffrey Epstein, who was a monster, and all of those folks who were dealing with him.
Okay, so there he is saying Trump chickened out. Okay, so he's attacking Trump on Epstein. And guess who else is? Thomas Massie, of course. And the reason Thomas Massie is attacking Trump on Epstein is not because Thomas Massie is so deep in the weeds on Epstein and cares deeply about... I mean, he's right next to Ro Khanna. Come on. Ro Khanna, the Democratic congressman from California who despises the president of the United States. The reason they're holding hands is not because they are so deeply ensconced in the Epstein case. It's because Massie doesn't like many of the things that Trump is doing as president, which is why Trump wants him primaried. Here is Thomas Massie trying to claim credit for all of this.
What do you make of the president's reversal? How do you see it?
Well, he got tired of us winning, and he decided to join us. Look, they could have done this 4 months ago, and instead they fought us every bit of the way. Now they want to be on our side. We'll accept their support. But we're, a little bit suspicious of this sudden turn of events. So we'll keep an eye on things. We're worried that maybe they'll try to muck it up in the Senate.
Again, look at the coalition here. Just look at the coalition here. And there's a reason that CNN is now praising Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene was a joke and remains a joke today. The attempt to turn Marjorie Taylor Greene into some sort of honest, great intellect is like the perfect example of how strange new respect is earned simply by attacking President Trump. That's all. It's like amazing. Here is CNN's Dana Bash praising Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, remarkable interview and just a sea change from what we've seen. In some ways, some of the rhetoric she was saying sounded like Joe Biden of there's more that unites us than divides us. That is not the sort of rhetoric we are used to hearing from President Trump and the MAGA base.
Again, like, it's so ridiculous. What happened is that Marjorie Taylor Greene did an interview where she apologized for her toxic language. No one believes this. No one with half a brain believes this, but you're looking for a rationale for glazing Marjorie Taylor Greene because she opposes the president now. It is that simple. It is that simple. How much so? Jamie Raskin, who was a participant in the impeachment trial for President Trump on the Democratic side, congressman from Maryland, says Marjorie Taylor Greene should join the Democratic Party now.
We are a big tent. We must be a huge, vast tent. I say this is a party that's got room for Marjorie Taylor Greene if she wants to come over.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Again, it is indicative of what's actually happening. The Epstein thing, particularly from the right, is just a way to undermine the president's agenda. It really is. Because no one on the right truly believes that the president of the United States is complicit in a child sex trafficking cover-up. If you're on the right and if you believe that, you should just say it out loud. You really should. I notice the cowardice of people who are softly making this claim. They never mention Trump's name. At least credit to Massey. He'll at least say Trump's name. I mean, I think he's wrong, and I think his priorities are screwed up, but at least he'll say the quiet part out loud. All these other people are like, President Trump, people around Trump. Somebody is manipulating the Epstein. Somebody. Well, again, the same people who are fellow traveling with Steve Bannon, a literal advisor to Jeffrey Epstein, complaining about President Trump. I think maybe you guys have another agenda. Alrighty, coming up, we're going to be joined by Scott Jennings. Plus, we will talk about the AI bubble. Is that about to burst? First, there's a lot of stuff that this time of year people are thinking about replacing in their house. Maybe you need to repaint your house. The walls are all scuffed up. Or maybe you need to change out some of the machinery in your house. But here's the thing that we can all do better, and that is our sleep quality. Boll & Branch makes the magic happen for you. They're having their best sale of the year right now, 25% off everything on their site. If you've been thinking about upgrading your bedding, this would be the magical time. I'd start with their signature sheets if I were you. They've really nailed that sweet spot between being soft and breathable, which makes a huge difference for getting good sleep. The cool thing is they actually get softer every time you wash them. They're made with top quality 100% organic cotton. All their stuff is worth checking out. The blankets, throws, pillows, duvets, it's all built to last. The best part? Everything is on sale right this very instant. I've told you about this before. I literally take one of their throw blankets on the road with me when I'm traveling. Yeah, it's a lot of suitcase space. That just tells you how much I love their product. Plus, they've got this 30-night guarantee. So if you're not happy with it, you're covered. Pretty much zero risk. Give yourself and your loved ones the most extraordinary feeling sleep with 25% off site-wide, plus free shipping and extended returns during Boll & Branch's best sale of the year. Shop right now at bollandbranch.com/Ben with code Ben. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/Ben, code Ben for 25% off. Exclusions apply. Also, Grand Canyon University, an affordable private Christian university based in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, is one of the largest universities in America. Praised for its culture of community and impact, GCU integrates the free market system, a welcoming Christian worldview, and free and open discourse into 369 academic programs with over 300 online. Join a nationwide community of learners, redefining what online education looks like through academically rigorous, industry-driven programs that can spark bold ideas and prepare you for a future that matters. In addition to federal grants and aid, GCU's online students received nearly $161 million in institutional scholarships in 2024. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu/myoffer to see the scholarships you may qualify for. Again, that's gcu.edu/myoffer. A lot of universities out there that are basically churning out useless degrees and nothingness or indoctrinating kids with stupidity. Not the case at Grand Canyon University. Find your purpose there. Private, Christian, affordable. Check them out at gcu.edu/myoffer and see the scholarships you might qualify for. Joining me on the line is Scott Jennings. He, of course, is a senior political contributor at CNN, host of the Scott Jennings Show on Salem Radio, and he's the author of the brand new book, A Revolution of Common Sense, How Donald Trump Stormed Washington and Fought for Western Civilization. That is out today. Scott, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Ben, thanks for having me on. Good to see you.
So let's talk about your brand new book. Obviously, President Trump has been under a lot of fire recently. That is happening from both the right and the left. But the reality is that he is the transformative figure of our period, no question. So what caused you to write this book?
Well, when I was listening to his inaugural address, he used the phrase, a revolution of common sense. And I thought that would make a great title for a book. When I pitched him on it in February, I told him I thought he revolutionized political campaigning. And at that point, he had hit the ground running with 200 executive orders. I mean, they had really smashed Washington before it ever got out of bed. And I said, I think you're revolutionizing governing. It's the most active presidency since FDR. And I said, I think 100 people are going to write a book crapping on you, and somebody who likes you and voted for you ought to write a book about it. and about how middle America is absorbing what you're doing. And he bought it, and we worked together on it. I interviewed the cabinet, a lot of his staff, and spent some time with him. It was an eye-opening experience.
Now, Scott, one of the things that I find fascinating about President Trump, and I've been talking about this a lot, is that when people say MAGA is an ideological program, that's not true. President Trump is MAGA, and he is unbelievably pragmatic. He tends to take the 70 position on pretty much every 70-30 issue. And what that means is that he ends up oddly being a moderate in a world of polarized politics. That's what happened in the last election cycle. While the media want to portray him as some sort of wild-eyed fanatic, the reality is that they are significantly more fanatical in their politics than President Trump is in his day-to-day politics.
Yeah, look, he would describe his decision-making as just trying to take the common sense issue. Now, he would also say, and I've asked him before, do you consider yourself to be a conservative? And he said, yeah, but most of the time conservative is common sense, but I'm trying to do the common sense thing on most issues. So in the book, I write about DEI issues. I write about his taking on the transgender cult out there. I write about the straws, the paper straws. I mean, I was in the Oval Office today. He banned the paper straws. I mean, he sort of picks things out that are common sense, 80-20, that annoy people, that are culturally significant. And he is not afraid to go after it. And, the last 4 years under Biden, we were sort of all walking around being forced to accept things that we knew were nonsense, but everybody was too afraid, I guess, out in the institutional world to say it. Trump comes in and takes the wet blanket off of America. And part of his political magic is just saying what everyone else is already thinking, but they're too afraid to do it. He does it for them.
Scott, one of the things that's been very weird to watch is obviously we're now seeing people inside the Republican Party acting as though the president is a lame duck. He is not, in fact, a lame duck. He still has 3 years left of his actual presidency. But there's this bizarre attempt by some to wrest away what they think is, quote unquote, the legacy of MAGA from President Trump, as though MAGA exists apart and aside from President Trump. What do you make of it?
Well, what I make of it is that the isolationists in the Republican Party who have always wanted Trump to be a pure isolationist, but who are sorely disappointed in it, are trying to move away from him or trying to destabilize his presidency. I trace it all back to the decision to strike Iran. When that happened, you had a number of people who've been in his orbit, who've been claiming to be his supporters, who were urging him not to do it. He defied them. And ever since that moment, they've been picking at him. They've been trying to destabilize him. They've been opposing him. Take Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance. You go back to the summer, she's opposed him on that stuff in the Middle East. Now she is opposing him on deportation. She runs off to The View to criticize him. And so what I see are the pure isolationists who are disappointed with Trump trying to separate him from his people. I think it's a fool's errand, truthfully. Trump is as popular with his base today as he's ever been. And of course, when these things happen, the media always tries to, they want to argue, finally, Donald Trump's losing his base. Finally, he's, a lame duck, as you say. Of course, none of this is true. It's complete and total nonsense. He's the strongest political figure, the strongest party boss we've had in modern American politics, and that's not changed today.
One of the things that, again, is fascinating is the attempt to sidetrack him with things like the Epstein scandal, which supposedly is about President Trump. And again, it is such an obvious op by so many of his political opponents to elevate this when the Biden administration had full access to all of these files for 4 years. If they wanted to release some bad information about President Trump from the files, there's no doubt that absolutely would have happened, and that the president of the United States at the time, Joe Biden, would have actually had the power to do that. They had no scruples about his tax returns leaking into public view, for example. It is amazing to me that there are so many members on the Republican side of the aisle who really are attempting to undermine his presidency by focusing in on Epstein. And again, this idea that there's something deep and dark hiding in the Epstein files, and that's what President Trump is bothered about. I mean, you spent time with him. He's been saying, and people I've talked to who are very close with him have been saying, no, the real reason he doesn't really want all that out there is not because he is anti-transparency. It's because he doesn't feel like talking about dumb crap in the middle of a presidency that is still very active.
That's 100% correct. This issue is still not anywhere near the most important issue for the American people. A, he knows it. B, look, there is some governing responsibility here. I mean, let's just pretend you've got some boxes of documents sitting here. People's names appear in those documents who may not have done a thing wrong. All of a sudden, you dump this out on the street. Now people are implicated in something who've not been charged with a crime, who haven't done anything wrong at all. I think that's a valid concern. But the bottom line is Democrats are constantly looking for things to tie him up, run out the clock on his presidency. They did it in the first term. This is obviously what they're trying to do with this in the second term. So now they're all going to vote for it, and fine. I'll tell you, the left may regret going down this road. I mean, what have we learned so far? We've learned a Democrat member of Congress, Stacey Plaskett, was being programmed to say things in committee hearings by Jeffrey Epstein. We've learned that Larry Summers was soliciting dating advice from Jeffrey Epstein. He's now having to step back from public life. There may be a number of figures on the left here who get ensnared in embarrassing situations here or worse, but I don't think it's going to be Donald Trump at all.
Well, Scott, having spent so much time with the president, what do you think his top priorities need to be in the run-up to the midterm elections? Obviously, affordability is on everybody's mind. He has spelled out a few kind of ideas that he's thrown out there. The truth is that some of this is just not in his hands because, beyond things like not passing gigantic inflationary bills, there's not much that's in any president's hands, actually, with regard to the general overall global economy. What do you think the president needs to focus on?
Well, I mean, look, the thing that dictates outcomes in elections is almost always the economy. And so, to the extent that he's already put in motion his economic policies, making permanent the tax cuts, deregulation, energy production, which, by the way, has lowered gas prices. It was $5 under Biden. We're approaching $2 under Trump. That's absolutely true. But part of the issue is now selling it and saying, my policies will lead to this better trajectory for the United States. So some of it, I think, is just focus. And what do you spend your time on and attention on, giving the American people the feeling that you're in touch with what they're feeling in their daily life. He's a great salesman. And so, up until now, I think he's been somewhat of a foreign policy president, which may shock a lot of people. He's had a ton of foreign policy success. In the run up to a midterm, I would just run around the country. They hired him in the first place because he's a businessman and they trust him to make correct economic decisions. I think he's made good economic decisions so far. He just now needs to go explain why he's got the trajectory correct. And he cannot let the Democrats get away from this affordability debate scot-free here. I mean, these people took prices to the moon under Joe Biden, and now they want to lecture him about normalizing rates of inflation. It's kind of crazy. You can't memory hole that 4-year period where prices went to the moon. It's not like prices are going to go back to 2017 levels, but the rates of inflation here, I mean, it's laughable to hear a Democrat criticize him on, grocery prices or anything else after what they did to the country. And I think reminding voters of that is a critical issue.
Well, that's Scott Jennings. His brand new book is A Revolution of Common Sense, How Donald Trump Stormed Washington and Fought for Western Civilization. And of course, you can watch him on CNN, particularly on Abby Phillip, shall we say, battling with the left. Scott, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ben.
Already coming up, we'll jump into some fast facts first. Thanksgiving is all about gratitude. Friends, family, food. Between travel costs, groceries, Black Friday deals, your wallet might be feeling that squeeze. If money stress is creeping in this holiday season, it's the perfect time to focus on your credit health. Because strong credit means less financial stress, not just in November, but all year long. That's where Kickoff comes in. Kickoff makes building credit incredibly simple. Sign up in minutes from your phone with no credit check, no hidden fees, zero interest. Users with credit under 600 grew an average of 84 points in their first year with on-time payments. For just $1, your first month, you can start building credit immediately and then continue with transparent plans starting at $5 a month. Set up autopay. You'll never worry about missing a payment, while the credit bureaus see your good behavior and your score can grow fast. With over 1 million users and hundreds of thousands of positive reviews, it's clear why Kickoff has become the #1 credit builder on the App Store. It's the safe, trusted, and affordable way to take control of your credit journey. Start building credit with Kickoff today. Get your first month for as little as $1. That's 80% off the normal price when you go to getkickoff.com/Shapiro today. That's Kickoff without the C. Get KIKOFF.com/Shapiro. Must sign up via getkickoff.com/Shapiro to activate offer. Offer applies to new Kickoff customers first month only. Subject to approval. Offer subject to change. Average first-year credit score impact of plus 84 points. Vantage score 3.0 between January 2023 and January 2024 for Kickoff credit account users who started with a score below 600, who paid on time, and who had no delinquencies or collections added to their credit profile during the period. Late payments may negatively impact your credit score. Individual results may vary. Well, meanwhile, the economy continues to be essentially on a razor's edge. Yesterday, there was another market rout. This has continued from last week. According to the Wall Street Journal, an intensifying sell-off across financial markets on Monday ensnared everything from gold to crypto to high-flying tech stocks, dragging the Dow Jones Industrial Average to its worst three-day stretch since President Trump's tariff turmoil in April. Investors in recent days have dumped assets in the lead-up to key tests for whether the AI boom and economic growth that powered stocks to successive records in 2025 will continue into the new year. NVIDIA on Wednesday is set to report earnings in the latest snapshot for chip demand. September jobs data delayed during the government shutdown is also due out on Thursday. Monday's retreat came as Amazon is set to issue $15 billion in bonds, and it provided fresh evidence Wall Street is peeking under the hood of the expensive and sometimes circular deals underpinning one of the largest infrastructure buildouts in American history. Again, this is something that we've been talking about for a while. We talked a little bit last week about the circular deals that are now embedded in the economy, particularly with regard to the chip build-out. Warren Buffett's latest bet on a big tech firm wasn't enough to juice investors' optimism for other AI names. Berkshire Hathaway's multi-billion-dollar purchase of Alphabet stock sent the Google parent 3.1% higher on Monday. Google, by the way, may be the only company that is in fairly good shape here. The rumors are that Gemini 3 is supposed to be unbelievable, which is their latest AI. With that said, even Google's Sundar Pichai is saying that if the bubble bursts, it's going to hurt everybody.
Given the potential of this technology, the excitement is very rational. It's also true when we go through these investment cycles, there are moments we overshoot, right, collectively as an industry. We can look back at the internet right now. There was clearly a lot of excess investment, but none of us would question whether the internet was profound or did it drive a lot of impact. It's fundamentally changed how we work digitally as a society. I expect AI to be the same. So I think it's both rational and there are elements of irrationality through a moment like this.
Now, again, it'll be interesting. I mean, even he is sort of saying it, right? That there's a lot of bubble here. And that's not just him, right? Sam Altman of OpenAI, which is the company that may be the center of the bubble, because OpenAI is privately traded. And so that means there are a lot of deals that are happening with OpenAI in which companies are essentially lending OpenAI money to buy chips on the other side, or they're investing in OpenAI, and then OpenAI is using that money in order to buy chips from NVIDIA, and then NVIDIA is lending more money to OpenAI and all the rest. Well, all the way back in August, he suggested that we may be in a bubble. Quote, when bubbles happen, smart people get overexcited about a kernel of truth. Are we in a phase where investors as a whole are overexcited about AI? My opinion is yes. Is AI the most important thing to happen in a very long time? My opinion is also yes. And again, that seems rational to me. But one of the key indicators that maybe we're in a bubble is that the institutional investors seem to be divesting themselves of stock in places like NVIDIA. That is true apparently for Peter Thiel. Report yesterday that Peter Thiel is dumping his stake in NVIDIA. Peter is, of course, an incredibly smart human being. And so you'd be well advised to follow his trading strategy rather than being the guy who's picking up the stock from Peter Thiel. Apparently, they sold off their entire stake in NVIDIA during the third quarter. Their fund sold around 537,000 shares in the AI chip frontrunner in the quarter. That stake would have been worth around $100 million. Now, again, that's not like a giant chunk of NVIDIA's stock. NVIDIA is the highest valued company on planet Earth right now in the trillions of dollars. But it is an indicator. You sell when you think the market's high. You don't sell when you think it's going to keep going up. Meanwhile, over at Kalshi, one of our sponsors, the worries about the Federal Reserve deciding not to cut rates further. Basically, I think there's enough liquidity in the economy. As I've been saying, I'm of the opinion the Fed is not going to cut rates in December because they're looking at this. The inflation is still too high. There are not problems with obtaining liquidity. There's a problem of what to do with the liquidity. Right now, the Kalshi market suggests 52% of people are saying that the Fed will maintain its current rate. 49% of people are saying they will cut the rates. That is a dramatic jump from November 12th, when almost 75% of people were saying that they were going to cut the rates, and only a quarter of people were saying they weren't going to cut the rates. So something is changing, and something is changing pretty quickly here. Now, meanwhile, this is only exacerbating concerns about affordability, because if people feel as though what's coming around the bend here is nothing good, and they're already paying too much money, they're worried about what comes next. President Trump is out there touting his economic record yesterday. He was saying that the investments are coming in fast and furious. He did this at the McDonald's Impact Summit, where he opened, by the way, with a great joke about how a fry cook has become president because, of course, he had that very famous photo shoot where he was in the back room at a McDonald's cooking up the fries. Here he was yesterday talking about his economic strategy.
We have over $17 trillion being invested in our country in 9 months. It's now just about ready to crack 18. And by the end of 1 year, we will have about $20 to $21 trillion invested in our country. That's more by 10 times the highest amount ever invested in any country ever before. And it's largely because of tariffs.
Okay, now, I disagree. Okay, I disagree. You can have a bunch of companies that come in and say they're going to put billions of dollars into the American economy and make big statements at the Oval Office about it. If that money never materializes, or if it only materializes over the course of years, or, as is the case, they're already planning to make those investments and now they're just announcing it publicly, that doesn't change the trajectory of the economy. The economy has worked better under President Trump than it did under Joe Biden for a few very simple reasons. One, the tax rates are consistent. They are not changing. Two, regulations are coming down. Those would be the big reasons. It is not because of the tariffs. Okay, the president was touting his tax cuts. The big problem with him touting the tax cuts is that, well, it's great that we maintained the same tax rates in the one big beautiful bill. That didn't fundamentally change the underlying substructure. There was uncertainty in the economy about whether taxes were going to go up. But once they just stayed where they were, that isn't actually, quote unquote, a tax break. It's just a continuation of his very successful first-term policy in lowering taxes.
While Democrats wanted to give Americans the largest tax hike in history in July, I proudly gave you the largest tax cuts in American history and signed the one big beautiful bill. I call it the great big beautiful bill into law. That includes no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for our great seniors. That is a big deal.
Okay, now, again, he's not wrong. It is a big deal. But does it fundamentally change the underlying systems in the United States to the extent that you're going to get more investment and more innovation? Or does it just maintain what was? And at the same time that you're maintaining what was, which is a good thing, if you throw a bunch of sand into the gears with the tariffs, what you end up doing is creating confusion. And so people are taking the money that they have and they are stacking it. Again, it is not a coincidence that they are stacking their money, particularly in the markets, at the upper end of the market in areas that are significantly less subject to tariff regulations like tech. The underlying fundamentals of companies that are, for example, manufacturing or service industry companies that require inputs from other countries, a lot of those companies don't know what's coming next, and that continues to be a problem. Now, President Trump is trying a bunch of short-term band-aids. This is always a bad indicator for an administration. When administrations have to rely upon short-term band-aids, they got a problem. Here's the president teasing the idea of giving $2,000 tariff rebates to people ahead of the midterms. Again, these sorts of like short-term juiced stimulus packages, they tend to increase inflation and they don't really change people's overall lives for the better in any significant way in even the midterm.
We've taken in hundreds of millions of dollars in tariff money. We're going to be issuing dividends later on, somewhere prior to, probably in the middle of next year, a little bit later than that, of thousands of dollars for individuals of moderate income, middle income. We're going to pay down debt. We have a lot of money from tariffs. If we didn't have tariffs, this nation would be in serious trouble.
Now, if you actually want to help Americans right now, particularly on, for example, student debt, where Americans took out hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt, largely subsidized by the federal government, and now they can't pay it back. Joe Biden tried to do student debt relief. He tried to basically just say, you don't have to pay anything back from now on. And again, that's a form of stimulus. It also creates an incentive trap, a disincentive for people to actually pay back their loans and all the rest. There has been some talk about shifting the burden of payments over to the colleges rather than to the taxpayer. Basically saying that if people default, the colleges have to eat it if those colleges have been handing out crappy degrees, which, yeah, I'm kind of fond of that. I'd be interested in legislative solutions regarding that, at least on a going forward basis. But the reality is what the markets are looking for, as always, is simply some level of consistency, some level of sustainability. And all of these short-term band-aids are very unlikely to achieve that sort of thing. Meanwhile, President Trump can count on the Democrats continuing to be as crazy as humanly possible. Graham Plattner, who is the Nazi-tattooed candidate from Maine, who is essentially a cradle socialist masquerading as a man of the people, as so many Democrats are. Here he was suggesting that if the Democrats gain control of government, they should pack the Supreme Court and change the systems of government. And the reason that Trump was elected, it's not just because of Trump. It's also because the Democrats have gone crazy.
We're going to have to start treating the Supreme Court like the political action wing that it has become of conservatism. It is not functioning as a constitutional body. And I firmly believe if we held Supreme Court justices to the same standard that we hold other federal judges, there is a compelling case for the impeachment and removal of at least 2 sitting Supreme Court judges.
So, I mean, if they campaign on this, then Republicans actually do have a better shot in the midterms. The more crazy Democrats go, the more Republicans have a better shot. Speaking of which, Hakeem Jeffries is now apparently going to face a primary challenger. There's no one left enough for the Democratic Party at this point. According to Breitbart, a Brooklyn city councilman known for his ties to progressive movements has formally launched a campaign committee to challenge House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries in the 2026 Democrat primary, mounting a rare intra-party bid against one of the highest-ranking Democrats in Congress. On Monday, November 17th, the FEC received a new statement of organization for a campaign committee titled Chi Osi for Congress. The filing confirms that Chi Osi, a 27-year-old Brooklyn councilman, intends to run in New York's 8th congressional district. He recently rejoined the DSA. Osi openly identifies as queer and has reportedly told political allies he plans to run during the 2026 midterms. He is a Zohran Mamdani acolyte. Mamdani apparently discouraged Osi from running. He's afraid that it's going to rip open the sort of gap that exists between DSA and the traditional Democratic Party. Apparently, again, he is an emissary of the radical left, and the radical left continues to eat the Democratic Party piecemeal. Meanwhile, mainstream Democrats are having some staffing problems. Apparently, Senator Tammy Duckworth's office, according to Breitbart, has now fired a staffer who is accused of pretending to be an attorney to free an illegal immigrant from ICE custody, according to a report. Fox News' Bill Malugin shared a letter that Duckworth directed at Todd Lyons, the acting director of ICE. In that letter, Duckworth explained she was responding to Lyons' November 12th letter regarding interactions between her now former staffer and ICE officials. And she added that her office has terminated the employment of the staffer. But these are the kinds of people who are staffing up some of the congressional offices, or people who masquerade as lawyers in order to apparently violate the law. Now, speaking of people, Democratic staffers violating the law, according to the New York Post, alleged Chinese mole Linda Sun brazenly forged then Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul's signature in glowing missives sent to dignitaries from the Henan province in China, according to feds and documents presented at her Bombshell trial. Jurors in Brooklyn federal court were shown copies of letters purportedly sent by Hochul on March 26, 2018, inviting a 6-member delegation from the province in central China to a meeting with then-Governor Andrew Cuomo. But the signatures were forged, apparently, by this person who was allegedly a Chinese spy. Sun was serving as Cuomo's director of Asian American Affairs and forged the governor's then number 2 Hochul signature several times that year in an attempt to curry favor with Chinese officials. And our government is honeycomb. There are a lot of people in the precincts of government who are working for the Chinese government. That is just a reality. It's an unfortunate reality, but it is indeed a reality. And that spans apparently coast to coast from New York to California. Meanwhile, again, the question of which party is going to act in the interest of sanity remains an open one. So Democrats continue to fail to acknowledge that their radical wing is going to hurt them. Bill Maher had an interesting episode of Club Random with Patton Oswalt, the comedian, and the voice of the rat from Ratatouille, about the fact on left-wing extremism. Here's what it sounded like.
That's not what we started to teach, which was that every baby is, I don't know, let's not even put it on the birth certificate. That's what they wanted.
Were we teaching that?
Yes, we
When were we teaching that?
Teaching it. It was a law here in California. See,
to teach what?
Don't put sex on the birth certificate. We'll see. Now, we've passed that period now.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that. I mean,
I know, because it doesn't get in the blue sky bubble.
Wait a minute, I'm not just on blue sky.
I really think that's a lot of it, is that some of this stuff doesn't get in to everybody's media.
He is right about that, but the fact that so many Democrats are unwilling to acknowledge that remains the problem. Sunny Hostin is one of those Democrats. Here she was on The View yesterday, suggesting that Trump's victory just demonstrates that Americans are racist and sexist.
This is a country based on racism and slavery and founded in it. There is systemic racism
and misogyny.
And there are people that I've never met anyone that raises their hand and says, I am racist. However, there are people that seem to be able to look the other way when it comes to racism. So you have a president who traffics in misogyny, who traffics in xenophobia, who traffics in sexism.
And won.
And won against a black woman. So don't tell me that this country is ready for a black woman. Don't tell me this country is ready for a woman.
I mean, one of the things here, it's just incredible. Democrats are going to continue to label the American people racist and sexist and all the rest, even though President Trump won huge numbers of women huge numbers of minorities. Now, that doesn't mean those people are going to stay in the Republican camp forever. And this is the problem for Republicans. When you look at the future, when you look at 2028, the question is not who can maintain Trump's coalition. Every politician must have their own coalition. That's just the way politics works. No one is going to inherit all of Trump's voters. They'll inherit a large portion of Trump's voters if they're Republican, but not all of them. And you need more votes than President Trump won in this last election to win the next election, because the voter base grows in every single election by a few million votes. And so the question is who can expand the coalition and how? That is the main thing that Republicans should be focused on when it comes to 2028 candidacies. Who can win? Who is capable of winning? Perhaps it's J.D. Vance. Maybe it's someone else. We don't know yet. Right? It's very, very early. One bad indicator for Republicans, Harry Enton is pointing out that President Trump's poll numbers among Latinos have taken a serious nosedive. That is largely because of the coverage around immigration. Again, when the president said deport all the illegal immigrants, I never thought that he meant that literally. I don't think anyone thought that he meant that literally, because it was never going to happen. We weren't going to take 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants and simply deport them wholesale. What President Trump did that's popular, when you break down his actual immigration policy, which is still one of his more popular policies, when you break down what he's actually doing, it's popular. But that's not the headline. Well, when we talk about winning the presidency in 2028, we should look back for a moment at how Republicans have done with the Latino Hispanic vote. So I asked our sponsors at Comet, a new web browser by Perplexity, to list the share of the Hispanic Latino vote won by each Republican presidential candidate since 1980. It was based on exit poll and major media data. Reagan won 37% in 1980 and 34% in 1984. Now, again, it was easier to win with those percentages when the country was significantly less Hispanic Latino. The percentage that you need to win of that vote in order to win the presidency has gone up because there are more Hispanic and Latino voters as a percentage of the population now than there were in 1980. 1988, George H.W. Bush won 30%. 1992, he won 25%. He lost. Bob Dole in 1996, 21%. He lost. 2000, George W. Bush won 35%. He won. 2004, 44%. He won. 2008, John McCain won 31%. He lost. 2012, Mitt Romney won 27%. He lost. 2016, President Trump won 28% and somehow pulled out that miracle victory, but he did lose the popular vote, obviously. In 2020, he won 32% and he lost. And in 2024, he won somewhere between 42 and 46% and he won. Okay, so if you were to set some sort of benchmark here that doesn't really include the kind of fluky wins that Republicans achieved, 2000 and 2016 were both unbelievably close elections. Republicans ended up winning, but not very handily. And they clocked in somewhere between 32 and 28%, somewhere in that neighborhood. If Republicans wish to win the presidency, and they wish to do so relatively handily, they need to win at a minimum 37 to 40% of the Hispanic vote. It seems to me that that is pretty clear, probably higher. And so if Republicans start losing those votes in massive numbers because Democrats stop being quite so crazy on the social issues and they back off some of their nuttier positions on crime and they stop doing the DEI kind of nonsense with regard to racial set-asides and trans and BLM, if Democrats move back toward normality, they will win a larger share of the Latino Hispanic vote. And Republicans are going to have to present something to Latinos and Hispanics in order to win. And again, that doesn't mean going soft on immigration. It just means actually enforcing the parts of immigration law that are the most popular to enforce. So right now, what he has done is he has shut the southern border. Totally popular. There are very few people who object to this, including Democrats. And then there's deporting criminal illegal immigrants. Again, very few people object to that. And then there are the sort of large-scale raids that are making a lot of press right now. And that apparently is alienating people. Here's Harry Enton explaining from CNN.
What about the Latino vote overall? All right, how do Latinos feel about Donald Trump overall? Let's take a look here. This, I think, sort of gives the game away. Goodness. Yeah, oh my goodness. I mean, that is the phrase of the day. Trump's net approval rating among Latinos. In early February, again, he was just 2 points underwater. Look at where he is now. Late October, minus 34 points. 34 points underwater. A shift to 32 points.
Okay, so again, this is something to keep an eye on. If you're a Republican who wants Republicans to win in 2028, obviously you do have to keep your eye on the polls and on reality. Okay, meanwhile, speaking of immigration, President Trump's immigration policy is now being adopted even by members of the left. Okay, that is the reality. And so if we are talking about the president's plummeting poll numbers with Latinos, one of the things that Republicans need to be pointing to again and again and again is that Democrats are just against deporting even criminal illegal immigrants. So North Carolina Governor Josh Stein, who is very upset that the ICE agents are working in Charlotte, he's out there claiming the agents are targeting and racially profiling.
We've seen masked, heavily armed agents in paramilitary garb driving unmarked cars, targeting American citizens based on their skin color, racially profiling and picking up random people in parking lots and off of our sidewalks, going after landscapers simply decorating a Christmas tree in someone's front yard.
Okay, this right here is going to be the Democrat campaign. It's incumbent on President Trump and the administration to continue to show the faces of the criminal illegal immigrants that they are arresting and to publicize those extremely heavily. That's what they should be doing, because here's the reality. Everybody with any shred of common sense knows that that's a good idea, including, by the way, the UK. According to the Wall Street Journal, the UK government on Monday announced an overhaul of its immigration policy to deter asylum seekers from arriving on British shores, the latest European nation to tighten rules in response to growing dissatisfaction from voters at levels of illegal immigration. The Labour government of Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a suite of policies, including changing laws to make it easier to expel migrants, quadrupling the length of time they have to wait to become permanent residents to 20 years, and regularly reviewing whether their home countries have become safer and can take them back. Britain is also threatening countries, mainly in Africa, with restricting visas unless they accept illegal migrants and criminals back into their countries. So even Britain is now adopting the immigration policies of the President of the United States, which makes perfect sense because those are practical policies. That's the stuff that the Trump administration needs to be focusing on, and they can't allow the narrative to get away from them with, colorful images about the suffering of Abuela being arrested in front of the Christmas tree. Alrighty, coming up, we'll get to the latest in the Middle East, a major move by the Trump administration with the acquiescence of the United Nations, actually. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member, use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.